In the annals of biblical history, few figures loom as large as Samson, a man whose extraordinary strength was matched only by his complex and often tumultuous life. Born in ancient Israel during a time of Philistine oppression, Samson emerged as a beacon of hope for his people. Samson's story, found in the Book of Judges, is a tale of divine calling, superhuman feats, moral struggles, and ultimately, sacrifice. As one of the last judges of Israel before the era of kings, Samson was more than just a strong man. He was a living symbol of God's power and the consequences of both faith and disobedience. From his miraculous birth to his dramatic final act, Samson's life was marked by moments of triumph and tragedy. His incredible strength, granted by God and symbolized by his uncut hair, allowed him to perform astounding feats that have captured imaginations for millennia. Yet, Samson's story is not just one of physical prowess. It's a deeply human tale of temptation, betrayal, and redemption that continues to resonate with people today. As we delve into the life of this legendary figure, we'll explore not just the man, but the enduring lessons his story imparts about faith, duty, and the complexities of human nature. In a small village of Zorah, nestled in the hill country of ancient Israel, lived a couple named Manoah and his wife. They were childless, their hopes of parenthood fading with each passing year. But fate had something extraordinary in store for them. One sun-drenched afternoon, as Manoah's wife rested beneath an old olive tree, a figure appeared before her, radiant and otherworldly. It was an angel of the Lord. With a voice that seemed to echo from the heavens themselves, the angel declared, "You are barren and have no children, but you will conceive and give birth to a son." The woman's heart raced. Could it be true? But the angel wasn't finished. "Take care not to drink wine or strong drink, or eat anything unclean," the celestial messenger continued. "For the boy shall be a Nazirite to God from the womb to the day of his death." When Manoah heard the news, he fell to his knees in prayer, asking for the angel to return. His wish was granted. The angel appeared again, reiterating the importance of the child's consecration to God. Months passed, and true to the divine promise, a son was born. They named him Samson, meaning like the sun, a fitting name for a child destined to shine brightly in Israel's history. From his very first breath, Samson was set apart. As a Nazirite, he was bound by a sacred vow of dedication to God. This vow came with 3 primary restrictions. He must never consume grape products, touch a dead body, or cut his hair. These weren't mere rules. They were symbols of his complete devotion to God's purpose. As Samson grew, so did his hair, long, wild, and untamed. It wasn't just a physical feature. It was a visible reminder of his special covenant with God. With each passing day, an extraordinary strength began to manifest in the boy. He could uproot small trees with ease and outrun the swiftest animals. The village buzzed with whispers and wonder. What would become of this child, born of a miracle and blessed with such might? Little did they know that Samson's strength would become legendary, his adventures the stuff of epic tales, and his life a testament to both the power of faith and the pitfalls of human weakness. As Samson stepped into adolescence, the weight of his destiny began to settle on his broad shoulders. He was to be a deliverer, a judge of Israel, called to begin the liberation of his people from Philistine oppression. The stage was set for a life that would shake the very foundations of the ancient world. As Samson grew into a young man, his legendary strength was about to be put to the test. One balmy afternoon, he set out on a journey to Timnah, a Philistine town where he had spotted a woman who caught his eye. The dusty path wound through vineyards heavy with ripening grapes, a temptation Samson resisted due to his Nazirite vow. Suddenly, the peaceful scene was shattered by a bone-chilling roar. From between the rows of vines burst a young lion, its eyes blazing with hunger and fury. Any ordinary man would have fled in terror, but Samson stood his ground. As the beast lunged, time seemed to slow. In that moment, we're told, the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him. With bare hands, Samson grappled with the lion. his muscles strained, veins bulging as he wrestled the massive predator. In a display of strength that defied belief, Samson tore the lion apart as easily as one might tear a young goat. The vineyard fell silent, save for Samson's heavy breathing. Amazed at his own power, yet humble before God, Samson continued his journey without boasting of the incredible feat to anyone, not even his parents. Sometime later, Samson returned along the same path for his wedding. Curiosity led him to the spot where he had slain the lion. To his astonishment, he found a bizarre sight. A swarm of bees had made their home in the carcass, filling it with honey. Samson scooped out some of the sweet treasure and enjoyed it as he walked, again keeping this strange occurrence to himself. At last, Samson arrived in Timnah for his wedding feast. As was custom, he was surrounded by 30 Philistine companions. The air was thick with the scent of roasted meat and spilled wine. Feeling clever, Samson's eyes twinkled with mischief as he posed a riddle to his companions. Out of the eater, something to eat. Out of the strong, something sweet. He wagered 30 linen garments and 30 sets of clothes that they couldn't solve it within the 7 days of the feast. The Philistines, their pride on the line, accepted the challenge eagerly. For days, the men racked their brains, growing increasingly frustrated. As the feast neared its end, they turned to underhanded tactics, pressuring Samson's new wife to coax the answer from him. Torn between loyalty to her husband and fear of her people's threats, she wept and pleaded with Samson until he finally relented and revealed the solution. On the 7th day, just before sunset, the Philistine men approached Samson with smug grins. They recited, "What is sweeter than honey? What is stronger than a lion?" Samson's eyes flashed with anger, realizing he had been betrayed. In a voice that rumbled like distant thunder, he retorted, "If you had not plowed with my heifer, you would not have solved my riddle." Little did the celebrating Philistines know that Samson's fury would soon be unleashed upon them, marking the beginning of a long and tumultuous conflict. The stage was set for Samson to fulfill his destiny as Israel's deliverer, one feat of strength at a time. Samson's anger burned hot after the betrayal at his wedding feast. The Philistines had won his wager through deceit, and to make matters worse, they had given his wife to another man. Revenge simmered in his heart, igniting a chain of events that would shake the very foundations of Philistine rule. Under the cover of night, Samson embarked on a daring plan. He caught 300 foxes, tying them tail to tail in pairs. With a wicked gleam in his eye, he fastened a torch between each pair of tails and set them ablaze. The foxes, frantic with fear, bolted into the Philistines' fields. As dawn broke, chaos erupted. The Philistines awoke to a hellish sight. Their precious wheat fields and vineyards engulfed in flames. Olive groves, the lifeblood of their economy, crackled and burned. The fire spread like a ravenous beast, devouring everything in its path. Anguished cries filled the air as years of labor went up in smoke. When the Philistines discovered Samson was behind this devastation, their fury knew no bounds. They retaliated by burning Samson's wife and her father alive, a cruel act that only stoked the fires of Samson's wrath. "Since you've acted like this," Samson roared, "I swear I won't stop until I get my revenge on you." With righteous anger fueling his strength, Samson struck them viciously, causing great slaughter. But this was just the beginning. Seeking refuge, Samson retreated to a cave in the rock of Etam. The Philistines, however, were not content to let him be. They marched into Judah, spreading out in Lehi, demanding Samson be handed over. Fearing retaliation, 3,000 men of Judah approached Samson, pleading with him to surrender. "Don't you realize that the Philistines are rulers over us?" they asked, their voices trembling. "What have you done to us?" Samson, his eyes flashing with defiance, replied, "I merely did to them what they did to me." Bound with 2 new ropes, Samson allowed himself to be led to the Philistines. As they approached, the Philistines came toward him, shouting in triumph. But their victory cry soon turned to terror. Suddenly, the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon Samson. The ropes on his arms became like charred flax, falling away as if they were nothing. Surrounded by enemies, Samson's eyes darted around desperately for a weapon. There, half buried in the dust, he spotted the jawbone of a donkey. Snatching it up, Samson became a whirlwind of destruction. The jawbone whistled through the air, striking down Philistine after Philistine. Men fell like wheat before a scythe, their screams of agony and terror filling the air. When the dust settled, 1,000 Philistines lay dead, felled by the most unlikely of weapons. Exhausted but exultant, Samson tossed aside the jawbone and named the place Ramath-Lehi, Jawbone Hill. His throat parched from the battle. He cried out to God for water. The Lord split open a hollow place in Lehi, and water gushed out. Samson drank, his strength revived, a potent reminder of God's provision even in the aftermath of violence. As Samson stood there, surrounded by the carnage he had wrought, the weight of his calling as Israel's deliverer settled upon him anew. He had struck a mighty blow against the Philistines, but this was far from the end. The legend of Samson was growing, and with it, the hope of Israel and the fear of their oppressors. Years passed, and Samson's exploits had become the stuff of legend. The Philistines lived in fear of his strength, yet they continued to rule over Israel. It was during this time that Samson's heart led him down a path that would change everything. In the valley of Sarek, Samson met a woman who would prove to be his undoing. Her name was Delilah, and she was as cunning as she was beautiful. With her raven hair and captivating eyes, she ensnared Samson's heart. Despite his strength, Samson was weak against the charms of this Philistine temptress. Their relationship was passionate and intense. Samson, who had never truly opened his heart before, found himself vulnerable in ways he'd never experienced. Delilah, for her part, played the role of the devoted lover perfectly, all while harboring a secret agenda. The rulers of the Philistines approached Delilah with an irresistible offer: 1,100 pieces of silver from each of them if she could discover the secret of Samson's strength. Greed glinted in Delilah's eyes as she agreed, setting in motion a deadly game of cat and mouse. In the intimate moments they shared, Delilah began her subtle interrogation. "Tell me," she would coo, running her fingers through Samson's long hair. "What makes you so strong? How could you be bound and subdued?" Samson, still wary despite his infatuation, decided to play along. 3 times he lied to Delilah, and 3 times she tried to betray him, calling in Philistine men lying in wait. Each time, Samson broke free with ease, his true secret still safe. But Delilah was relentless. She pouted and prodded, wearing down Samson's resolve day after day. "How can you say I love you," she would cry, "when you don't trust me with your heart?" Finally, exhausted by her constant nagging and blinded by what he thought was love, Samson's resistance crumbled. In a moment of fatal vulnerability, he revealed the truth that had been hidden since his birth. "No razor has ever touched my head," Samson confessed, his voice barely a whisper. "I have been a Nazirite set apart to God since birth. If my head were shaved, my strength would leave me, and I would become as weak as any other man." Delilah knew immediately that this time, Samson had told her the truth. That night, as Samson slept with his head in her lap, she called for a man to shave off the 7 braids of his hair. As each lock fell to the ground, it was as if the very essence of Samson's power was being shorn away. Delilah began to torment him, and Samson stirred. "Samson," she cried, "the Philistines are upon you." He awoke, thinking he would shake himself free as before. But something was terribly wrong. His strength had vanished, and with dawning horror, Samson realized what had happened. The Spirit of the Lord had left him. In that moment of betrayal, as the Philistines seized him, Samson understood the true cost of his misplaced trust. His eyes, which had looked upon Delilah with love, would soon see no more. His strength, once legendary, was now gone. As he was led away in chains, Samson's thoughts must have turned to his past glory, his divine calling, and the fatal flaw that had brought him low. But even in this darkest hour, destiny was not finished with Samson. His greatest act was yet to come, born from the depths of his humiliation and repentance. The Philistines fell upon Samson like a pack of wolves on a wounded lion. Gone was the man who had terrorized them for years. Before them now lay a shadow of his former self. As the reality of his situation dawned on Samson, the weight of his folly crushed down upon him harder than any chains ever could. They bound him with bronze shackles, the metal biting into his wrists and ankles. Samson strained against his bonds, muscles bulging, veins throbbing in his neck. But where once chains would have snapped like thread, now they held firm. The mighty Samson, betrayed by love and shorn of his strength, was powerless.